Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Been a little bit of an interesting week here on the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. Did a full show on Monday. We'll do a full show on Thursday. But in between, I've been hosting a lot of Fox Sports Radio. Make sure to check me out there. And we haven't had a ton of time to do a lot of stuff. And so I wanted to give you a nice, lengthy bonus clip here on the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. And we're going to do a segment I do every single summer. And what the segment is pretty straightforward. We are going to look at every five-star high school basketball player in America going into their senior years and predict where they end up in college hoops. And so this is an interesting time for the college hoops kind of recruiting calendar. The Adidas Championships just ended last week. Peach Jam will end this week. And a lot of these players are starting to cut down lists, make visits, and several of them are on the cusp of committing. And so we're going to go through, going to give you my opinion on all these players, about 12, 13 players, where they end up. We do it every summer. This is the perfect time to do it. But before I do, just one last caveat, and that's this. Some of these kids are very close to committing, and you will hear that in my confidence in these picks. But also it's worth noting that several of these players are not close. Some of them haven't even cut down a list. Some of them don't have visits set up. And so what I'm going to do is give you a confidence level on all of these players. 1 to 10, who is my pick? But more importantly, realistically, how confident am I on a 1 to 10 scale? So that's a lot of talking, but let's get into it. The 2025 class is awesome. Let's go ahead and dive in with my predictions for where all of these five-star players ultimately end up. Let's start with the number one player in America, a guy we've talked about even just in the last week, AJ Dybantsa, originally from Massachusetts, played at Prolific Prep. Now he's going to Utah Prep next season. We talked about him, first of all, incredible player. And we talked about this with Cooper Flagg a few days ago, where I think sometimes my space in the media, I've become kind of jaded to, this player is the best since this, that player is the best since that. But with AJ Dybantsa, what I love about him is I think he really does check all the boxes. Big, athletic, can finish at the rim, mid-range jumper, can make plays, and really competes at both ends of the floor. You watch the Team USA stuff, the U17 stuff. This was a kid, he'd block a shot out of bounds and he'd be pumping his chest or screaming at a kid's face, and it didn't feel fake. He feels like the ultimate competitor, etc. As far as his recruitment, interesting because we talked about it last week, and there was a very interesting development over the last couple days. That's this. Last week we talked about, he spoke with Kristen Peak, Yahoo, and basically he said, look, I don't even talk to coaches as of right now. My dad handles everything. And when it's time for me to kind of get to know these coaches, that's when we kind of, that's when he brings me in, and we're just beginning this process. And so I mentioned a few schools that I think will be in the mix, Arkansas, Duke, etc. But there was an interesting update this week surrounding one of the few schools that he's taken an unofficial visit to. As best I can tell, the only 3 unofficial visits that he's done: USC under the old staff with Andy Enfield, who's now at SMU, Auburn, and BYU. And so earlier this week, it became a little bit of a thing on the internet, and this reporter I respect the hell out of, so I want to make sure to make that clear. Gary Parrish on his CBS Sports podcast was kind of just talking in passing about AJ Dybantsa. And he said that he asked one coach at Peach Jam this week, hey, if you had to pick a school right now, who would you pick? And he gave an answer, and it kind of went viral, so I want to get into that. But he mentioned the BYU Cougars, and it was certainly noteworthy. Even on the podcast, his co-host Matt Norlander was like, BYU? But the bottom line is, look, the kid took an unofficial to BYU, is in school, in high school at Utah, short proximity. Kevin Young, to his credit, has proven in a short amount of time that he can recruit. Yegor Demon, the projected lottery pick, is going to BYU next year. Cannon Ketching is a potential first-round pick going to BYU next year. And so I don't think it's crazy, but what I would say is this, is that as of right now, I can tell you, because I've talked to a couple staffs that are recruiting this kid, I think it's fair to say that there is ultimately no leader right now. As I said, the dad handles most of the recruitment. They're going to cut their list soon. One thing I do feel confident in saying, I do believe that BYU will be one of the schools that at least gets a visit. But that doesn't mean that they're the definitive favorite or he's definitively going there or whatever. So when it comes to my pick for AJ Dybantsa, again, we're using confidence levels to display if I'm actually confident in the pick or not. I don't think there's a favorite. I'm certain there's not a favorite right now. And I guess I'll just say BYU with a confidence level of 1 out of 10, with 10 being the most confident that I can possibly be, because there is no leader. I do believe that BYU is going to be one of 4 or 5 schools that gets a visit. But again, you could talk to AJ, you could talk to his dad. There is no leader right now. But boy, oh boy, would that be something if the BYU Cougars ended up with AJ Dybantsa. By the way, be something if Arkansas ended up with him, be something if Duke ended up with him. My UConn Huskies, I think they're kind of scaling back their recruitment of him. Anyway, that's AJ Dybantsa. Number 2 on this list, another great player, Cameron Boozer, second-ranked player in America. Dybantsa, Cooper Flagg, 3 young guys you can't go wrong with, okay? Cameron Boozer, of course, is one of 2 twin sons of Carlos Boozer, 6'9", but he doesn't play, he doesn't play like his dad. He's athletic, he's fluid, he runs the floor. To his credit, he's got a great head-to-head record against some of these other very good players. Beat Cooper Flagg in the 16U Peach Jam last year. And so Cameron Boozer is number 2. And there's a couple notes on him. One, he does have a twin brother who is also in this class, a point guard named Caden Boozer. They say they're separate recruitments, but I feel like they're going to probably end up at school together. But 2, it is worth noting that the family is very outspoken of, we want to be recruited. This isn't a done deal to Duke. We're not 100%, and we're listening to other schools. So they took a visit to Kentucky when Calipari was there. Miami, they live in the Miami area. Florida, the Gators, Todd Golden feel like they're in the mix as well. But ultimately, what I would say is, if you're making me pick today, I do think Duke's got to be the favorite because they check the boxes, right? It's not just that their dad went there. Like if their dad went to, respectfully, San Diego State or Cal, I don't think that he's necessarily following his dad's footsteps. But he's on that one and done trajectory. Duke can do that. Duke can sell that. Duke can sell that quick level development. By the way, Cooper Flagg is going to be out the door. There's going to be a vacuum in terms of a star. I would say with a confidence level, what did I just say? 6, 6.5, 7 maybe, that Cameron Boozer ends up with the Duke Blue Devils. Let's get to number 3. Another player we talked about recently, Darryn Peterson. And I think because Cameron Boozer, because AJ Dybantsa are so good, I think this kid just gets totally lost in the shuffle. But big point guard, big guard, about 6'5", 6'6". He's originally from Ohio. But like I said, I think in most other classes he would get more credit, but it's just a matter of the top 2 guys are so good that this kid kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Like I said, 6'5", 6'6", has all the moves, can finish at the rim, mid-range, 3-point shooting, gets others involved, had a game at the Adidas Championships where he went off for 38 points. And this is just a kid that, in my opinion, is insanely talented. He would have been the number 1 player in last year's class well, not with Cooper Flagg, probably number 2, but certainly the class before. But again, gets a little bit lost in the shuffle. Now, as far as him, we talked about it a few weeks ago because his dad said that he was open to taking other visits in addition to the ones that he's already done. Visited Kansas. He's from Ohio, now plays at Huntington Prep in West Virginia. But he's from Ohio, so Ohio State's going to get a visit, and Kentucky was the conversation at that point. End of the day, though, with Darryn Peterson, my belief is pretty straightforward. He is an Adidas kid, quite literally. Like, he has actually signed a true NIL deal with Adidas, already taken a visit to Kansas. And while other schools are going to try, maybe Arkansas with Calipari tries, end of the day, in my opinion, I think it's just about done. I think it's going to be Kansas. I say it with a confidence level of 8.5 or 9. Darryn Peterson, really good player. My guess is he will be a Kansas Jayhawk. Let's get to number 4, Darius Acuff, a fascinating story. A lot of these kids are, by the way. 6'3", 6'4" guard, originally from Detroit, now plays at IMG Academy. just a quintessential, just attack the basket downhill guard. Fill in the blank on whoever you want it to be. Derrick Rose, John Wall, whomever, but gets to his spots, beats you off the dribble, finishes with both hands. Really talented player. And what's noteworthy about him is that as I was going to record this today, he actually cut his list on, I'm recording this for people who are watching it later on, but I'm recording this here on the 17th of July. So we are talking about a Wednesday in the middle of July. Bring it up to very simply say that he cut his list. The final four was UConn, Arkansas, Kansas, and Michigan. He's from Michigan. Kansas, Arkansas, and UConn speak for themselves. But the note from Wednesday is that he has officially cut UConn from his list. We'll get to why later in this. But my belief is, listen, I could go on and on. He's going to end up at Arkansas. He's probably the guy on this list that is the most close to committing. As best as I know, I don't think he has any other visits set up. Visited Arkansas in the spring. Been a guy that's been linked to Calipari forever. And it's for all the obvious reasons. He wants to be a pro. He's that lead guard that Calipari has put 1 million of them into the NBA. Mentioned Derrick Rose, mentioned John Wall, didn't mention De'Aaron Fox, didn't mention Tyrese Maxey, didn't mention Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But listen, you can criticize Calipari for a lot. When he has that track record with those guards, it's hard to pass up on that. Darius Acuff, I believe, will be an Arkansas Razorback. No announcement date as of now, but would expect him to commit in the near future. Number 5, really interesting player, and I know I'm saying it about all of them, but it's such a great class. Koa Pete, 5-star out of the state of Arizona. Okay, so he's an intriguing one, and I know they're all interesting. He has been phenomenal basically since before high school. And I know some of these kids, it doesn't work out but he's been about 6'8", 6'9", kind of that new age 3-4 guy. And he's basically been the same guy. I remember seeing him after, I believe, his freshman year of high school. Pangos All-American Camp. It was when Derek Lively was going into his senior year. Jalen Duren, who ended up reclassifying that summer, was at that camp. So you're talking about a guy. So Derek Lively graduated in 2022, right? So we're talking about this was after either his 8th grade year or his freshman year. I wouldn't say he was the best player at the camp, but was completely unafraid of the players that were there. So he's been on the radar forever, plays for a great AAU program based out of LA named the Compton Magic, and was another player that was part of that Team USA U17 team. In terms of his recruitment, recently took a visit to Houston. And he's one, I'll say this, he's from Arizona. I think Arkansas, Calipari, Calipari has a great relationship with Compton Magic dating back decades. I'm pretty sure maybe some Compton Magic guys went to play for him at Memphis. But at the end of the day, why I bring it up, Koa Pete's a guy that I get the sense is probably at the beginning stages. We just mentioned Darius Acuff is at the end stages of the process. I think Koa Pete is very much at the beginning stages. Wouldn't surprise me. By the way, very smart family, and savvy family, right? Brother plays in the NFL. Andrews Pete, former first-round pick out of Stanford. So they get kind of how the quote-unquote game is played. You don't have to rush the process, weigh all your options. And I think especially in this era of college basketball, where rosters really don't get determined until April and May, a lot of turnover on the coaching carousel, this feels like the kind of kid that is probably waiting until the spring. If I had to make a pick, probably it'd be either Arkansas or Arizona. I'll say Arkansas. I think Arizona is very much in the mix as well. But on a confidence scale, if I said AJ Dybantsa is a 1, this is a 1 as well. He's in the early stages. We kind of know who's kind of in the mix, but I think this is at the beginning stages for this kid. And by the way, if you're this good and you can take your time in the process, go ahead and do so. Let's get to number 6. By the way, Torres loves to talk because we are 15 minutes in. I'm only on number 6. But the number 6 player in the class, Caleb Wilson. Caleb Wilson, unique in the sense that really was like a rising star this time last year, kind of struggled. Kind of not struggled, but inconsistent over the course of the year. But 6'8", 6'9". I know I'm saying that for a lot of these guys, but wing player. And he is one where, again, just feels like outside of, all these other guys have had big summers, AJ Dybantsa, Cam Boozer, whatever. And Caleb Wilson's been a little bit quieter. No, in terms of his recruitment, there was some North Carolina buzz early. No, there was some buzz from some other schools. He's another one. He's had a long relationship with Calipari and his staff. If I had to guess right now, this second, I'd pick Arkansas. But Arkansas, again, we're talking about Acuff was like a 10 for Arkansas, 9.5, whatever I said. Koa Pete's like a 1. We'll say this kid's like a 3, 3.5, 4, because I just think it right now, this second, feels a little aggressive to make too many bold predictions. Number 7, another player that is just so interesting. And I know I've said that for everybody, but it's a kid named Nate Ament out of Virginia. 6'10" player, fast rising kid, because he's a kid that the last couple of years has hit a couple major growth spurts. Like I'm pretty sure probably in like the last 2 years, he's grown about 7-8 inches. And now he is this do-it-all, super athletic, 6'10", can space the floor, can play down low, can do just about everything. Now, the issue when you become a super fast-rising player is the recruiting process is pretty new to him. I saw an interview with him out of the summer circuit a few days ago, and they said, what schools are you interested in? And he listed like 10 different schools. Duke, and he's from Virginia. Kentucky, Mark Pope and his staff have known this kid since dating back to their BYU days. And so another player, he is at the beginning. I don't even think he's set up any real visits yet. And by the way, when you blow up in the manner that he did, it's hard for me to blame you to take your time, because, we're talking about a kid that just in the last couple months got offers from places like North Carolina, UConn, Kentucky, Kansas, all in the last probably 3 months since about early May or so. So, young man, you don't need my advice, but if you want it, enjoy the freaking process, enjoy the recruiting process. The relationship with Kentucky makes me feel like the relationship with Mark Pope maybe makes me feel like they're in some sort of driver's seat. Also worth noting, by the way, there's a 4-star center out of Kentucky named Malachi Moreno, who Kentucky is very hot after as well. So maybe that plays a role. He's from Virginia, but is a 5-star kid really going to go to Virginia? I'll say Kentucky. But again, I want to be clear. I want this caveat out there. We are talking about a confidence level of 1.5 to another player who is at the beginning stages. I'm sorry that I'm not more confident on some of these picks, but I got to be transparent with you. I got to be honest with you, and that's what I'm thinking. Let's get to number 7. Michael Brown, 6'3" guard, plays with Overtime Elite. Michael Brown Jr. I really like him. Attacking guard, fearless, just has that experience of playing at that big time program in Overtime Elite. And what's kind of interesting with him is a few things. Is one, has had a growth spurt of his own. I believe last, I don't know, he was 5'9", 5'10". Now he's like a legitimate 6'3", gets to all his spots. Really, really good player. And because of it, like a lot of guys on this list, the recruiting process has blown up in the last probably 2 or 3 months. Arizona, Alabama, Louisville among the schools that have offered him just in like the last probably 6 to 8 weeks. So I don't know where he is in the recruitment. I will say there are a few crystal ball predictions in for Ole Miss. Obviously, Ole Miss, Chris Beard is going to be very good at Ole Miss as long as he's there. Michael Brown is a very talented player. They seem to have the inside track. They've recruited well at Overtime Elite. They signed a player or two out of that program this past year. Go ahead and give me Ole Miss. The confidence level, I'll say 4, 4.5, because, again, another player who I think now that he's really had a great summer, I would expect him to keep blowing up. Number 9, let's get into it, because one player. So if you're yelling at your screen like Torres won't give me confidence on anybody, let's get to the number 9 player in America, Meleek Thomas, a player who actually just announced himself that he's headed to Overtime Elite, 6'4" guard. Really, really athletic, finisher at the rim, gonna play in the NBA. You could just see the size and the length, and he's gonna fill out that frame, and he is going to be a really good college player and a very good NBA player as well. Bring it up because he was a guy that very much it felt like it was going to be an Arkansas UConn thing. And then as Arkansas has picked things up with Darius Acuff, I think the inverse is true as well. I think you just see more and more confidence coming out that it's ultimately going to be UConn for Meleek Thomas. UConn fans feel confident. Meleek Thomas was the player who famously was asked after Dan Hurley interviewed for the Lakers job, what do you think of a coach that's recruiting you, potentially going to the NBA? He said, that makes me like UConn more. That makes me think that if the Lakers want him, if LeBron wants him, if whoever wants him, then that means that guy knows what he's doing, and that's a guy I can trust. So I don't think there's a time frame, but my guess is he is going to be a Husky. It's going to be sooner rather than later, probably before his senior year starts. I will say with a confidence of 9.5 that Meleek Thomas is ultimately a Husky. Number 10, Isaiah Harwell, 6'6" combo guard, talented player, but unfortunately a guy that has dealt with some injuries this spring, hasn't really played that much. He had a knee injury, knee surgery, all the stuff that happens there. You feel bad for the kid because this was a kid like a year or two ago we were talking about him in kind of that next tier behind Cameron Boozer, behind AJ Dybantsa. And just because he hasn't been able to play, has had, he's just kind of out of sight, a little bit out of mind. And it's a shame because he's a really good player. In terms of his recruitment, he's one that's in the sort of home stretch. He has cut a list to 4: Cal, Gonzaga, Houston, and Texas. He has said he will announce in September. Worth noting, he's visited 2 of those schools. I believe he's visited, I want to say Gonzaga and Cal. And I think Houston and Texas are still on the list. My guess would be this kid is originally from the state of Idaho. Not great at geography, but you know what borders Idaho? Eastern Washington. You know where Spokane is? Eastern Washington. I'll say Gonzaga Bulldogs are the team to beat here. Houston, Texas have a lot to offer. Texas going to the SEC. Houston in the best conference in college basketball. Even Cal, Mark Madsen is a great rising coach, and I think he's going to be good there. I'll say Gonzaga, confidence level of 6, and he's another one. We should get clarification in the next 6 or so weeks because he says he's committing early September. We are up to player number 11. 4 players left. We'll be quick on this. Number 11, Braden Burries out of Southern California, not far from where I live. Another underrated kid, 6 foot, 5 guard, 6'4" guard, gets to all his spots, can score, can finish at the rim, and one who's had a relatively quiet recruitment. He's from the West Coast, obviously had a great summer, but it feels like this is one right now that's trending towards the Arizona Wildcats. Arizona obviously always recruits the West Coast well. Carter Bryant, 5-star McDonald's All-American, comes in this year's class. And that Southern California region, I can tell you the basketball people here love Arizona, love what they're about. I don't think it's anything imminent or definitive. I will say Braden Burries with a confident level of 5 ends up as an Arizona Wildcat. Let's get to player number 12, Jasper Johnson. I'm going to use that word again. Fascinating. Well, I won't use interesting. I'll use fascinating. 6'4", lefty combo guard. I really like Jasper Johnson, man. Gets to the rim, finishes at the rim. Give him credit. He was a local legend in the state of Kentucky. His father played football at Kentucky, but he decided to go to Link Academy to challenge himself at the highest level. Love what he's about. Hits threes. Talented guard. You get the point, okay? But what's interesting is it feels like in the last couple weeks, so he's down to basically 3. He plans on kind of committing soon. It's Carolina, Alabama, and Kentucky. What was it, about 2.5 weeks ago? Him and Malachi Moreno both went to Kentucky on a visit. And I kind of got the sense, I was like, I think both these guys will probably end up a Wildcat. They're both from the state of Kentucky, whatever. But it feels like Kentucky's kind of fading. And I have some speculation, but I don't think it's necessarily the right fit for both sides. And just because a kid let me put it this way. Just because interest is fading or one school is trending up, it's not always because the kid is cutting the school. Sometimes the school doesn't feel like it's the right fit, but I get the sense that this kid is probably headed to Alabama, probably headed to North Carolina more than he is headed to Kentucky, which feels kind of weird for a Kentucky kid. So I'll say Carolina. They're going to lose Ian Jackson after this year. They're going to need that plug and play guy. I would say with a confidence level of 5.5, because Alabama, for whatever reason, owns Carolina in recruiting and on the court of late. Beat them in the Sweet 16 last year. Beat them when they were ranked number 1 the year before. Beat them for Cliff Omoyori head-to-head. But I'll go ahead and say Jasper Johnson ends up at Carolina Tar Heel with a confidence level of 4.5. 2 more. We'll get out of here. I guess 3 more. Jalen Harrelson, wing, 6'6", from the Midwest, was part of the U17 team. Big wing. I almost said something else. Big wing. Plays on both ends of the court. Played very well for that Team USA team. So much talk about Dybantsa and Cameron Boozer and even some of Brandon McCoy, who's a younger player. But Jalen Harrelson played well. He's from the Midwest. It feels like a mostly Big Ten recruitment. Michigan State, Indiana, Purdue. Auburn is the only school outside that seems like they're really after him. I'll say with a confidence level of 3, it's Purdue. Doesn't really feel like a Purdue player necessarily. He could be a potential one and done. So does that open the door for an Indiana and Auburn who's more likely to produce pros on a quicker scale? I don't know. Obviously, Purdue fans are going to get mad at me for saying that, but it's just the truth. It's just a different way of running a program, and Matt Painter's doing it as well as anybody right now. I'll say Purdue, confidence level 2.5, 3 on that. Finally, final 2, Chris Senack Jr. out of New Orleans. Amazing. Great story. Was a kid that was outside the top 100, blows up in the early evaluation periods, blows up, was the MVP of the NBPA Top 100 camp. And I'm talking in the matter of days. Got offers from Duke, from UCLA, from UConn, from every major school, Arkansas, Kentucky, etc. 6'10", stretch 4, stretch 5, from Louisiana. Just announced he's transferring to Link Academy. Recruitment is at the very beginning stages. Think early on LSU had to be deemed a favorite because he's from New Orleans. Getting out of New Orleans, I find it hard to believe that he's going to end up at LSU. By the way, it feels like Syracuse is really pushing hard on him. They were kind of in early. But this is one, I think the recruitment is just starting because, again, there are schools that are interested that weren't interested even a week or 2 ago. So I'll say Chris Senack Jr., whatever. I can't even speculate. I don't even think he knows where he's going. Like I said, Syracuse has been in the mix from the beginning. LSU, I don't think it's going to be LSU. But again, is it an SEC school? Alabama, Auburn, Baylor's not in the SEC, but they're in that footprint. Everybody's after this kid, though. Final player, Bryson Tiller, Another player who's a little bit banged up, plays with overtime elite, athletic 6'10" kid. He's been banged up. There was a little bit of a recruiting update in the last day or so. Feels like Indiana leads there, but does it? I don't feel, I would say like a 3.5, 4 in terms of confidence level. They're probably going to need some big guys after this year. Umar Ballo is going to be gone. Mackenzie Mbako is probably going pro. Malik Renew might at very least test the waters. So I will say Bryson Tiller, Indiana, confidence level of 3.5. Tell you what, just gave you 30 minutes on high school basketball recruiting. Hope you enjoyed it. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, make sure to do so. Do your boy a favor. Freaking click the subscribe button, would you? Would you do your boy Torres a favor? We'll be back later this week. Full episode on Thursday. Hope you enjoyed this. Make sure to subscribe, rate, review the show. Share this with friends. This video needs to go viral. We'll be back here